Molly's hands trembled as her mother's words cut through her like a knife. Your success means nothing. Your sister, Nao, is my true gold. Everyone froze. Molly had worked for years, sacrificing her dreams to lift the family from poverty, only to be dismissed like dust. But what her mother didn't know was that Molly had already set into motion a plan that would change everything forever. Molly sat at the table with her eyes fixed on the plate before her. Her mother's words had just sliced through her heart like a sharp blade, but she forced her lips into a faint smile. To everyone else, it looked like nothing had touched her, but inside, she was breaking apart piece by piece. The weight of years of silence pressed down on her chest, yet something inside her refused to bend this time. Across the table, Nao leaned back confidently, her lips curling into a smirk, basking in the glow of her mother's praise as if she were wearing a crown. The attention filled the room like smoke, choking Molly, but she remained still. The family's eyes darted toward her, waiting for the usual bow of her head, the quiet acceptance, the humble retreat that had become her role. But tonight there was no bow. Molly's fingers wrapped tightly around the stem of her glass, and though her knuckles turned pale, she did not let go. Her silence stretched across the table, louder than any words she could have spoken. It unsettled the air, making everyone shift uneasily in their seats. The silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strength, sharp and cutting. Her father coughed nervously, her mother narrowed her eyes, and Nao tilted her chin higher, as if daring Molly to challenge the moment. Yet Molly didn't speak. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just stared ahead, her faint smile frozen like a shield. That quiet defiance was new. It was dangerous. It made Nao's smirk falter for just a second, and her mother's voice rise with irritation, as though trying to crush Molly's spirit before it could grow. But Molly stayed calm, letting them drown in their own arrogance. She felt the tremble in her hands, the ache in her chest, but she knew that if she opened her mouth too soon, the fire inside her might burst out uncontrolled. No, not yet. Tonight was not the night for words. It was the night for silence that carried a warning. And so, she sat there, still and unreadable, her faint smile hiding storms they could not see. For the first time, Molly was not the obedient daughter, not the shadow. Her silence was no longer submission. It was the beginning of something they would never forget. Molly kept her eyes on her mother, but her mind slipped away, pulled back into the years she had tried so hard to bury. She remembered the long nights when the rest of the house was asleep, and she was still awake, her hands blistered from scrubbing floors at the hotel after her shift at the small shop. She would come home tired, yet she never complained. She told herself it was worth it if it kept the family afloat. When the rent was due and her parents whispered in fear about being thrown out, it was her savings that saved them. They never asked where she got the money, but she knew they saw the tiredness in her eyes. Still no one said thank you. Her chest tightened as another memory rose. Her acceptance letter to study abroad. That envelope had felt like the key to her dreams, a chance to finally live for herself. But then Nao had failed one of her exams, and her mother had cried that sending both girls to school would be impossible. Molly had watched her dream crumble quietly as she handed her chance away. She told her parents she would stay behind and work, just so Nao could continue. She convinced herself it was the right choice, that one day her sacrifices would be remembered with pride. But sitting at that dinner table now, hearing her mother call Nao the true gold of the family, that sacrifice suddenly felt like a cruel joke. She saw herself younger, rushing between jobs, eating plain bread for days so her siblings could have a proper meal. She remembered walking in the rain, her shoes worn out, but carrying home groceries for everyone else. She remembered patching Nao's school uniform with her own hands, while she wore the same faded dress to work for years. And every time she thought she couldn't keep going, she pushed herself harder, believing love would be enough. Now those memories burned. They were no longer proof of her love. They were chains that her family had used to bind her into silence. That single cruel sentence from her mother's lips, "Your success means nothing," had mocked every drop of sweat, every tear, every dream she had buried. Molly felt the crack inside her grow deeper, but at the same time, something fierce began to rise. If her sacrifices were invisible to them, then she would no longer waste them here. She had given them everything. And now, she would start keeping something for herself. Nao's voice rang through the dining room, sweet and confident. like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. She leaned forward, eyes shining as she began to talk about her new business deal. Everyone's attention turned to her. Their mother's face lit up with pride. The kind of pride Molly had never seen directed at her. But as the words flowed from Neo's mouth, Molly's heart froze. Every detail, every plan, every phrase sounded painfully familiar. It wasn't new. It wasn't hers. It was Molly's. Years ago, Molly had sat in that very same house with a notebook full of ideas. She had been so excited, dreaming of starting a small company that could grow into something big, something that would finally lift her family out of poverty. She had shared those ideas openly, trusting that her family would support her, believing that her sister would cheer her on. But back then, her mother had dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand, calling it foolish, telling Molly to focus on working and supporting the household instead. Molly had folded her dreams into silence, hiding the pain of rejection, never knowing that someone else was listening closely, her own sister. And now, here was Neo, dressed in elegance, speaking the very words Molly had once whispered with hope. She had stolen not just the idea, but the years of sacrifice and thought behind it. The betrayal cut deeper because it came wrapped in a smile, delivered by the very person Molly had given up so much for. As Neo continued, their mother clapped her hands in excitement, calling her daughter brilliant, gifted, and the future of the family. The sound of that applause rang in Molly's ears like thunder. She sat still, forcing her face not to change, but inside her chest, everything was burning. It wasn't only about the idea. It was about trust. She had trusted her family with her dreams, and they had laughed at her. She had trusted her sister with her heart, and she had stolen it. Neo's eyes flickered toward her just for a second, and in that glance, Molly saw it, the truth. Neo knew what she had done. She wanted Molly to see her shine with stolen light. Molly's fingers pressed harder around her glass, her jaw tight, her body still as stone. The betrayal hurt, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She let them laugh, let them cheer, let them call Neo the golden child. But inside, she made a quiet promise to herself. This would not end here. If they wanted to erase her sacrifices, if they wanted to mock her pain, then they would soon see the strength of the woman they thought was too weak to fight back. The sister they underestimated was no longer in the shadows. She was rising, and the day of reckoning had already begun. Her father's voice came low, almost like a whisper meant only for her. He leaned closer, his tone heavy with warning as he said, "Molly, sometimes peace is more important than pride. Accept your place, let Neo shine. That's how families stay together." His words fell like stones in her heart. To anyone else, they might have sounded like wisdom, but to Molly, they were chains being fastened tighter around her. She looked at him, the man she had once adored, the man she had worked herself to the bone for, and all she saw was his fear of conflict. He was not protecting her. He was protecting the fragile balance that always left her carrying the weight. Her chest tightened painfully. Was this what love was meant to be? A trap that demanded her silence, so others could rise? She thought of all the times she had given up her happiness in the name of love. Love for her parents when she took on their debts. Love for her sister when she gave away her own dreams. Love for the family when she endured insult after insult without a word. Each act had been coded in love, but each one had cost her pieces of herself. And now her father's warning was nothing more than another reminder that in this house, her love was only valuable if it came with sacrifice. Molly's eyes dropped for a moment to the table, her reflection faint in the polished wood. She barely recognized herself anymore. The tired eyes, the quiet mouth, the obedient posture. She was the shadow that kept everyone else's light burning. And in that instant, something inside her shifted. The shadow began to harden. Her father's hand patted hers as if the matter was settled, but when she lifted her gaze, her eyes were not the same. They no longer carried the soft plea of a daughter desperate to be seen. They carried steel. She did not speak, but her silence was louder than any rebellion. Love should never feel like chains. It should never force someone to shrink so another could stand taller. And Molly knew then that this trap had held her long enough. Her eyes swept across the table. Her mother glowing with pride for Neo, her sister basking in false glory, her father pretending peace was worth her pain. For years, she had been the quiet one, the forgotten one. But not anymore. Her heart had hardened, and her resolve had taken root. If they wanted her to remain a shadow, they would soon learn that even shadows can rise into light. Molly sat quietly, her fingers resting against the rim of her glass, but inside her heart there was a secret burning brighter than any insult thrown her way. What no one at that table knew was that she already had something they could never take away from her. While her mother praised Nao and her father begged for peace, Molly held the key to a future they could not imagine. She had worked in silence, saving every small coin, building herself slowly while they thought she was nothing but their safety net. And now, she had her golden ticket. It was not a ticket made of paper, but of opportunity, of freedom. Weeks ago, she had received the letter that changed everything. A partnership offer from a company that had noticed her hard work, a chance to own something that was hers alone. She had already signed contracts in secret, already put her name on documents that gave her independence. She had even found a place, a new home where her footsteps would not be drowned out by insults and favoritism. But she kept it all hidden. Her silence at the table was not weakness anymore. It was strategy. Molly knew that timing was everything. If she revealed her truth too early, they would twist it, try to take it, try to dim her light the way they always had. So she chose to sit there, allowing them to believe their words still held power. She let her mother's sharp tone cut into her. Let Nao's smirk shine as if she were untouchable. Let her father warn her into silence. None of them knew that she was already free. Her heart thumped steadily with the knowledge that soon their arrogance would be their own undoing. They were too blinded by favoritism, too lost in their belief that Molly would never rise above them. And that blindness was her shield. She glanced at Nao, who laughed proudly, speaking of her stolen business idea as though it belonged to her. Molly said nothing. She glanced at her mother, who beamed with pride at one daughter, while ignoring the other. Still Molly stayed quiet, but inside her a voice whispered of the day soon to come. The day when she would stand, not as the obedient shadow, but as the woman who had built her future with her own hands. For now she allowed them their pride. She let them dance in their arrogance. Because when the truth finally came, it would not just surprise them, it would shake the ground beneath their feet. Molly already held her freedom, and that secret was her greatest power. Nao leaned closer, her perfume heavy in the air, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She lowered her voice, but not enough to be private. She wanted everyone at the table to hear. Some people are meant to serve, she said slowly, savoring each word like poison. And others are meant to shine. Her laughter followed, soft but sharp, and it sliced through Molly's chest. The room shifted slightly, with their mother pretending not to hear, though her proud smile made it clear she approved. Their father cleared his throat, uncomfortable, but as always he chose silence. Molly felt her jaw tighten. The sting was deep, not just because of the insult, but because it carried the weight of every sacrifice she had made, now mocked openly by the very person she had given up everything for. She could almost see her younger self again, working 2 jobs, paying the bills, giving away her own dreams, only to be rewarded with this moment, this cruelty dressed as triumph. Her fingers curled tightly around her lap, but she refused to let her pain show on her face. Nao leaned back in her chair, proud of her little performance. She had spoken like a queen, as if Molly was nothing more than a servant at her feet. She expected Molly to bow her head, to sit in silence, to accept her place as she always had. But tonight was different. Tonight, Molly carried a fire inside her that no insult could extinguish. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, one that confused Nao for a brief second. Then, without raising her voice, without letting her calm break, Molly leaned in and whispered back. Her words were steady, almost too soft, but every person at the table felt their weight. "Shine too close to the fire," she murmured, her eyes locked with her sister's, "and you'll burn." The room stilled. Nao's smirk faltered, if only for a moment, before she tried to laugh it off. But her eyes betrayed her, flickering with unease. Their mother frowned, sensing something different in Molly's tone. Their father shifted uncomfortably again, though he said nothing. Molly leaned back in her chair, her expression calm, her silence once again louder than any argument. She had not shouted, she had not begged, but her words had struck like a blade. For years she had been the shadow, enduring insult after insult. But tonight, she had given her sister a warning. A storm was coming, and Nao had no idea how close she already stood to the flames. Her mother's voice broke the silence, sharp and commanding, as if she had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Molly," she said firmly, her eyes cold, "it's time you finally do something useful for this family. Your sister has an opportunity that will change all our lives, but she needs funding. You've been saving money for years, haven't you? Sign it over. Give it to Nao. That is your duty." The words landed like stones, heavy and merciless. Molly's heart clenched, but she kept her face calm. Around the table, her father cleared his throat awkwardly, but did not speak against it. Instead, he gave a small nod, as if surrendering to his wife's command. Nao sat straighter, her lips twitching with a proud smile, already imagining the money in her hands. One by one, the rest of the family agreed, their voices blending together in false unity. They didn't ask Molly what she wanted. They didn't even consider that the savings were hers. To them, she was just the quiet daughter who always obeyed, the one who carried everyone's burdens without question. Her mother pulled out a folder from her bag, filled with papers that had been prepared in advance. Contracts, agreements, transfer documents, all ready as if they had already decided Molly would give in. She slid the papers across the table, the pen placed on top like a weapon. The gesture was smooth, practiced, almost mocking. "All you need to do is sign," her mother said, her tone final. "It's a small sacrifice for the greater good." Molly looked at the papers. Years of her sweat, her sleepless nights, her sacrifices, all reduced to a few lines of ink. Her mother's eyes bore into her, daring her to resist. Nao leaned forward eagerly, her hand brushing the pen, impatient for Molly to give her everything. The room felt heavy, charged with expectation. Everyone waited for her to bow her head and obey, as she always had. But inside Molly something shifted. The very act of sliding those papers across the table, as though her life's work meant nothing, ignited a fire deep within her. Her silence was no longer weakness, it was resistance. She could see their arrogance clearly, their certainty that she would never fight back. They believed love meant blind obedience, that family meant chains she could never break. Molly's fingers touched the pen, but instead of trembling, they steadied. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting her mother's cold stare, then her sister's greedy smile. She said nothing, but her silence spoke louder than any refusal. She would not sign away her life. Not now. Not ever. The papers may have been weapons, but Molly was no longer the easy target they thought she was. The shadow was ready to rise. Molly stared at the papers in front of her, her mother's eyes pressing on her like iron. The pen lay waiting, heavy with expectation, but Molly's hands did not move to sign. Instead, she reached calmly into her bag resting by her chair. Every gaze followed her, confused at the interruption. With steady hands, she pulled out a neat folder of her own and laid it on the table. For the first time that evening, her lips curved into a real smile. Her mother frowned, impatient. "What is this now?" she demanded, but Molly did not answer. She simply opened the folder and slid the documents across the table, one by one. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. Then the words became clear. A deed to a new home, bought in her name alone. Papers of registration for a new company, not dreamed of but already real, already breathing with her effort. Bank statements that proved she had built something solid without their help, without their approval. The room froze. Gasps filled the air. The same mouths that had just moments ago ordered her to give up everything. Her father's jaw dropped, his hand hovering above the table as though the papers were too heavy to touch. Nao's face drained of color, the proud smirk vanishing, replaced by wide, desperate eyes. Their mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. For once, she was the one silenced. Molly looked at each of them, her calmness unshaken. "I won't be signing your papers," she said softly, her voice carrying more power than if she had shouted, "because I already signed my own." Her words sank deep, cutting through their arrogance like a blade. Nao's hand twitched, reaching for the documents, desperate to disprove them, but the proof was undeniable. Everything Molly had worked for in silence now lay before their eyes. The golden ticket they thought she never had was real, and it belonged only to her. The silence in the room grew heavier with every second. Their mother, once so sure of her control, now stared at her daughter as if she had never truly seen her before. Their father leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly, unable to form words. And Nao, her eyes brimmed with panic, her crown of false glory slipping before everyone's eyes. Molly gathered her papers again, sliding them neatly back into her folder. Her movements were steady, graceful, final. She had revealed the truth, and nothing could ever return to how it was. The shadow they had ignored for so long had stepped into the light, and no one at that table could deny it anymore. The room felt colder than before. The proud glow on their mother's face faded as if someone had blown out a candle. Her lips trembled, and for the first time, her voice failed her. The certainty she carried, the authority that always placed Nao above all else, had slipped away. She looked at Molly with eyes wide in disbelief, as though the daughter she had dismissed for years was suddenly a stranger she could not control. Their father shifted uncomfortably, his mouth opening and closing, trying to form words. "And Molly, how when?" he stuttered, his voice breaking under the weight of the truth. He had always gone along with the favoritism, hiding behind silence and pretending it was peace. But now the cracks showed, and his weakness was laid bare for all to see. Nao's mask shattered the most. The confident smile she had worn all evening was gone. Her hands trembled as she stared at the documents Molly had revealed. Her mind raced, searching for excuses, for a way to hold on to the crown of golden daughter that their mother had placed on her head. But nothing came. The ground beneath her feet was slipping, and she could feel it. For years, she had lived on borrowed light, shining with the sacrifices Molly had made, feeding on the ideas and dreams that were never hers. Now the truth stood before her, and her shine dimmed like ash in the wind. Their mother turned desperately toward Nao, searching for reassurance, but even she could see the fear in her favorite daughter's eyes. The arrogance that once filled the room had vanished, leaving only silence heavy with shame. The lies that had propped Nao up were no longer strong enough to protect her. She looked small now, exposed in a way she had never been before. Molly sat calmly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She did not gloat. She did not shout. She simply watched as the empire of favoritism collapsed before her eyes. Every insult, every dismissal, every time she was told she was less, all of it now returned like a mirror, showing the truth they had refused to see. The golden daughter was nothing more than a shadow built on stolen light. Their father lowered his gaze, unable to meet Molly's eyes. Their mother pressed her lips together, her pride swallowed by silence. And Nao, once the untouchable star of the family, sat frozen, stripped of her glory. The collapse had come, and nothing could hide it anymore. Molly rose slowly from her chair, and the room seemed to hold its breath. For years, her voice had been drowned out, her worth overlooked, her sacrifices ignored. But now, her calm strength carried more weight than all the shouts and accusations that had ever filled that house. Her eyes moved from her mother to her father, then to Nao, who sat trembling with tears streaking down her once proud face. "I gave you everything," Molly said softly, but every word was sharp as glass. "My time, my money, my peace. I let you take from me, because I thought that was love. But from today," she paused, her chest rising with the kind of courage that only comes after years of pain. "I choose myself." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. Her mother's lips parted, but no sound came. The father lowered his eyes, guilt heavy on his shoulders. Nao's tears fell faster, her hands clutching at the fragments of her stolen glory, as though she could piece them back together. But there was no saving it. Everything she built on lies had crumbled. Molly did not wait for their excuses. She turned and walked toward the door, her step steady, her head high. Each footstep echoed against the floor, not as a retreat, but as a declaration of freedom. For the first time, she was not carrying the weight of their demands, their favoritism, or their cruelty. She was walking into a life where her worth was no longer measured by what she gave away, but by who she truly was. Behind her, the silence was heavy. Her mother sat stiff, as if the power had been drained from her. Her father still could not lift his head, and Nao wept openly, her tears smearing the image of the golden daughter she had pretended to be. Molly did not look back. She did not need their approval anymore. The world outside that door was hers to claim, and the strength in her steps made it clear. She was no longer the forgotten one. She was the rising star, and nothing could dim her light again.